There have been some shocking global events this week, not just only winning silver in 2 hockey games, but really the shocking global event seems like a weekly occurrence. But this week, the Andrew, formerly known as Prince, was arrested, questioned, and then released. What happens next remains to be seen, but it is no longer impossible that a member of the British royal family could go to prison. It has been 350 years, it's been reported, since such a possibility existed. So this is not just a personal fall from grace for one person, but a tectonic shift in society. It has come about, of course, as we've been learning, that conspiratorial kind of stuff, like a relatively small group of cross-national power players running amok while hidden from public eye, this is not just the stuff of movies and TV shows like The Blacklist. Reality is sadly following fiction. That said, we've always known, everyone knows, that there are some people for whom the rules simply don't apply. And that being just the way it is, I imagine the sudden shift that Andrew's arrest and that of other powerful Europeans represents is a shock to some ultra-rich and powerful men who have not formerly been subject to many, if any, boundaries or consequences for their behavior. We've always known, everyone knows, there are some people for whom the rules simply don't apply. And I suspect that we're less concerned about that reality than maybe just a bit wistful, perhaps jealous or covetous of it. If them, why not us? Why not me? Why do I have to abide by society's rules and they, whoever they might be, don't? At the rather stunning speech in Davos last month, our Prime Minister addressed this phenomenon in a different way in terms of how it plays out globally. We know the story of the international rules-based order was partially false, he said. That the strongest would exempt themselves when convenient, that trade rules were enforced asymmetrically. And we knew that international law applied with varying rigor depending on the identity of the accused or the victim. Acknowledging this reality was part of PM Carney's vision for a new world order, a new way of living together on planet Earth. Now, none of us in this room move in the global circles of Carney or Andrew. We don't have influence on that kind of scale, but that doesn't mean that we are powerless. The same dynamics, similar issues exist in communities at every level. What are the boundaries of love is a ubiquitous question in every community. What boundaries are needed in our communities for love to flourish? What boundaries are required for us to live in paradise? And then how do we respond to those boundaries? How do we engage our personal power and agency alongside our freedom while staying within acceptable limits? Now, these kinds of questions have been around since time immemorial. According to our story in Genesis today, the first 2 people on earth, even before there were other people to consider, pushed against the very first boundary that God, their and our Maker, set. You may freely eat of every tree of the garden, God instructs. So far, so good. But of the tree of knowledge of good and evil, you shall not eat. And then a threat follows, but never mind, except as our story continues, the threat is unmasked in an effort to undermine the restriction. Every tree except one wasn't good enough. Even the first people wanted it all. No restrictions, no boundaries. And so the temptation comes, don't worry about any consequences. It is just what we want to hear. The temptation, the offer to power, to greater power, is just too sweet to pass up. This might be a mythical story, and we know it's true. We know that we are these people. Right alongside Andrew and Carney, good and bad, we're all just people trying to get away with whatever we can. Right alongside our genuine desire for freedom and justice and equality and love for all. We just don't want that love to mean abiding by a boundary. We know with the people in this ancient story how hard it is to live with restriction, even for the sake of love. And it is no less true here in the church as anywhere. We might be free to do almost anything and still desire for that one thing that's just out of bounds. A little over a year ago, we began an exploration that turned out to help show us this dynamic as a parish, certainly not by intention, overtly. The open space process that we used for our parish retreat, Moving with the Winds of God, offered us both a great deal of freedom and a great deal of responsibility. Participants, that's all of you, me, were invited to bring forward topics of concern and interest for discussion and action. It was a much different process than being asked to share your ideas or your opinions for someone else to act on. The freedom of bringing forward topics included the responsibility to work out next steps. None of which was ever meant to be done in isolation. It was a fundamentally communal process. And we know that genuinely working in community is hard. With so few overt boundaries or hierarchical structures in open space, most of the work is figuring out how to engage one's own personal power and agency while abiding by the boundaries of community, the boundaries of love. And that might sound good, but it is really challenging in practice. What are those boundaries? What boundaries are needed for love to flourish? Working that out with clear behavioral standards is most of the work. For love is not simply nice feelings, nor is it avoiding conflict. Indeed, avoiding conflict by accepting any and all behavior works directly against love. When any or all behavior is allowed to flourish, love is the first casualty. And the temptation then is to grasp at power over others, which is often expressed through behavior like emotional manipulation, secrecy, or intimidation. Working in loving community, alternatively, is about engaging power with others through listening, openness, honesty, and creativity. Power over, admittedly, works much faster, and it eschews vulnerability, much easier. Power with takes time and courage to genuinely see and be seen by others, to acknowledge and to work through differences. These are at least some of the boundaries of love, not nice feelings, but behavior that builds up. For love to flourish, our behavior must abide by boundaries from which nobody is exempt. There are people in our world with much privilege who are learning this the hard way these days in public. With our Prime Minister, I hope that we'll find a new way as a global community. Here at St. George's, my hope this year, 2026, much more attainable. That we build up our capacity to live with boundaries that build up our capacity to love one another as an example of love to the world.